The blue lights come out of nowhere. You're driving home, maybe a little tired, maybe thinking about something completely unrelated, and then suddenly your rearview mirror flashes red and blue. Your stomach drops. You glance at your speed. Was I speeding? Did I miss a sign? You slow down, signal, pull over. Your hands tighten on the wheel without you even realizing it. And before the officer even steps out of the car, something subtle has already started happening. Not just legally, but psychologically. Have you ever been pulled over and said something you later regretted, even though it felt harmless in the moment? If you have, I want you to share that experience in the comments, because what most people don't realize is that those small, casual responses during a traffic stop are exactly what officers are trained to listen for. And later in this article, I'm going to explain one specific moment where a single sentence can completely change how that interaction unfolds. Now here's the part most drivers never hear. Traffic stops aren't just about enforcing the law. They're also about gathering information. Every question you're asked, every pause, every glance, every hesitation you show, those are all pieces of a puzzle the officer is actively building in real time. And if you don't understand how that puzzle works, you can accidentally help complete it against yourself. Let me walk you into a real-world scenario. You're pulled over. The officer approaches your window. You roll it down. He leans slightly, just enough to observe the inside of your car, your hands, your passengers, the smell, the tone in your voice. Then it begins. Do you know why I pulled you over? That question sounds simple, almost polite, but it's not neutral. It's strategic. Most people answer it immediately. Maybe I was going a little fast, or I'm not sure, or worse, was I speeding? Here's the problem. The moment you start guessing, you're giving the officer something to work with. If you admit to speeding, even casually, you've just provided an admission. If you guess wrong, you might raise suspicion about something you didn't even realize was an issue. And if you sound unsure, nervous, or overly talkative, that gets mentally logged too. Officers are trained to ask open-ended questions like this because they want to see how you respond under pressure. Not just what you say, but how you say it. Now let's pause for a second. Imagine staying completely calm and saying something simple like, "I'm not sure, officer." Then you stop talking. That silence right there? That's powerful. And most people are deeply uncomfortable with it, so they fill it. They start explaining. They start justifying. They start talking themselves into trouble. And that's one of the biggest tricks that works on almost everyone. Silence makes people nervous. Not the officer, the driver. Let's take it further. The officer asks for your license, registration, and insurance. You hand them over. But instead of walking away, they stay there for a moment. Just a few seconds longer than expected. Watching you. Waiting. This is intentional. It's a pause designed to see if you'll volunteer more information. Many drivers do. They start talking again. "Sorry, I'm just trying to get home. I didn't realize the speed limit changed there. I've never been pulled over before." Each of these statements seems harmless, but collectively, they create a narrative. They give the officer insight into your mindset, and sometimes they give them probable cause to dig deeper. Now here's where things get more layered. Let's say the officer shifts tone slightly. "Where are you coming from tonight?" Again, sounds casual, almost conversational. But this is not small talk. This is a probing question, because now the officer is looking for consistency. They may follow up with, "Where are you headed?" Then maybe, "What were you doing there?" And suddenly, what felt like a simple traffic stop turns into a timeline verification. If your answers don't line up, even slightly, that raises flags. If you hesitate too long, that raises flags. If you give too much detail, that can raise flags too. This is why understanding the purpose behind these questions matters more than memorizing scripted answers. You're not being asked questions just for conversation. You're being evaluated. Now here's something most people don't realize until it's too late. Your body language is speaking just as loudly as your words. If your hands are moving a lot, if you're looking around too much, if your breathing is uneven, if your tone changes when certain topics come up, those are all signals. And officers are trained to notice patterns, not just isolated behaviors. So when drivers say, "I didn't do anything wrong," but the officer kept asking questions, what they often don't see is that something in their behavior triggered curiosity. Now let's talk about a situation that escalates quickly. The officer says, "Do you mind stepping out of the vehicle?" At this point, a lot of people feel like something is wrong. And legally, in most situations, officers can ask you to step out of the car during a traffic stop. It's been upheld by courts as a safety measure. But here's where things get tricky. The moment you step out, the dynamic changes. You're no longer in your controlled space. You're now physically separated from your vehicle, which gives the officer more freedom to observe it, walk around it, and potentially escalate the situation. And again, people start talking. Am I in trouble? Is there a problem? I didn't do anything. These questions are natural, but they also show uncertainty and sometimes fear, and that can influence how the officer proceeds. Now imagine a slightly different version of this scenario. You step out calmly, you don't resist, but you also don't start asking a stream of questions. You wait, you listen, you respond only when necessary. That restraint can make a significant difference, because here's the uncomfortable truth. Many drivers escalate their own situations without realizing it, not by being aggressive, but by being overly cooperative in the wrong way, by talking too much, by trying to explain everything, by trying to help the officer understand. And in doing so, they sometimes provide the very information that leads to further investigation. Let's go deeper into one of the most misunderstood moments during a stop. The officer asks, "Do you have anything illegal in the car?" It sounds direct, straightforward, almost like a yes or no question. But psychologically, it puts you in a defensive position. Even if you say no, the tone of your response matters. Hesitation matters. Eye contact matters. And if the officer follows up with, "Do you mind if I take a look?" Now you're at a critical decision point. This is where many people feel pressured to say yes. They think, "If I say no, I'll look guilty." But legally, consent is a powerful thing. If you give permission, you've just allowed a search that might not have been justified otherwise. And once that door is open, it's very hard to close. Now here's where that sentence I mentioned earlier becomes important. There is a calm, respectful way to respond without escalating the situation and without giving up your rights. Something as simple as, "I don't consent to any searches." That's it. No anger, no attitude, no long explanation, just clear, calm, and firm. But here's the catch. Saying that sentence only works if you actually understand why you're saying it. If you say it nervously, aggressively, or inconsistently with your behavior, it can still raise suspicion. Tone matters just as much as content. And this is where most advice online falls short. It gives you the words, but not the context. Now let's talk about passengers. Officers often shift attention to passengers when they feel the driver is too controlled or too careful. They might ask the passenger similar questions separately. "Where are you guys coming from? Where are you headed?" If the answers don't match, even slightly, that becomes a reason to dig deeper. And here's the part people overlook. Passengers often feel less prepared than drivers. They may answer more casually, more openly, without realizing the importance of consistency. So even if the driver is careful, a passenger can unintentionally create complications. Now imagine this. The officer goes back to the patrol car with your documents, and you're sitting there, waiting. What most people don't realize is that this waiting period is also part of the process. The officer is running your information, yes, but they're also thinking, reviewing your behavior, your answers, your tone, deciding whether to issue a warning, a ticket, or take things further. And when they come back, sometimes their tone changes. Maybe it's more relaxed. Maybe it's more serious. That shift is rarely random. It's based on everything that happened in those first few minutes. Now let's address a common mistake that seems small but can have real consequences. Interrupting the officer, even politely. When people are nervous, they tend to jump in, clarify, explain. But interrupting, even unintentionally, can be seen as disrespectful or evasive, and that can change the tone of the entire interaction. Respectful silence followed by concise responses is often more effective than constant explanation. Another situation worth talking about is when officers repeat the same question. Where are you coming from? So you said you were coming from work? What time did you leave? This repetition is intentional. They're looking for consistency. And under pressure, people often change small details without realizing it. Time becomes fuzzy, sequences blur, and suddenly something that was completely innocent starts to look suspicious. Not because it is, but because it appears inconsistent. Now think about how easily that can happen. You're nervous, you're trying to be polite, you're answering quickly, and you don't even realize that your answers are shifting slightly. That's why slowing down your responses matters. Taking a brief pause before answering is not illegal. It's not suspicious. It's human, and it gives you a moment to stay consistent and clear. Let's shift to another subtle tactic, the friendly officer approach. Sometimes the tone becomes casual, relaxed, almost conversational. Hey, I'm just trying to help you out here. Just be honest with me and we'll get through this. This approach is designed to lower your guard, and it works. A lot. People start opening up, sharing more than necessary, trying to build rapport. But here's the reality. The officer's role is not to be your friend in that moment. It's to enforce the law and assess the situation. That doesn't mean they're being deceptive. It means they're doing their job. And if you misunderstand that dynamic, you might respond in ways that don't serve your best interests. Now let me give you something practical to think about. Most traffic stops are resolved quickly. A warning, maybe a ticket, and you're on your way. But the difference between a simple stop and a complicated one often comes down to behavior in the first few minutes. Not just what happened before the stop, but how you handled it after. And that's the part you control. You can't control why you were pulled over. You can't control the officer's approach. But you can control your responses, your tone, your pace, your silence. And those small things carry more weight than most people realize. Now here's something I want you to really sit with. The goal during a traffic stop is not to win the interaction. It's to get through it cleanly, safely, and without creating unnecessary complications. That means understanding when to speak, when to stop, and when to simply let the moment pass without filling it. Because those quiet moments, the pauses, the silences, the spaces where nothing is said, those are often where the biggest decisions are made. And most drivers never even notice them happening.